So I actually came across the idea, I guess you could say, of the topic that I'm going to do this evening on on one of those situations where you ever had it where you're like looking at something online and you're reading about something and you hear a buzzword or you hear or you read a sentence that sparks your interest in something else, so you go look for that, and then the next thing you know, like a couple of hours have done passed, and you're reading about a topic that's so far off what you were originally doing that you have no idea even how you got there. And that's kind of what led to the groundwork for this one. But it did bring back some memories because I remember this right before I had left AA, there were people that were wanting to use kind of like a pseudoscience, and that's going to be the topic of this video is pseudoscience. To push a further like the AA agenda type thing. I knew this really horrible individual, I mean truly a horrible person, that liked to play the wise AA guru, but he loved to throw this word around, quantum physics, and he was forever playing that part in the meetings of being, I'm so smart and all the rest of you are so stupid. And he went and sent me, he's big on a certain guy, and I'm almost hesitant to say his name because he is actually popular among a lot of people. I've seen anti-AA people that like him as well, but I'm going to go ahead and say the name. He was big on Alan Watts, and he would send me all these Alan Watts videos because I was his sponsee at the time, and I never could watch them because he was always quick to tell me that the reason I couldn't get sober was because I was ignorant and because I was very narrow-minded and that I was very closed-minded, and that obviously that was one of the reasons why I couldn't get sober, because I was an ignorant, narrow-minded individual. And it was rich considering the source of who it was coming from, but we're talking about a guy that schemed people while he was in AA. I mean, he bragged about an incident one time where he had bought this girl crack, and she wouldn't do with him what he wanted her to do, so he tossed her out of his house in like 20-degree weather. Real spiritual dude, obviously, but he would use quantum physics and Alan Watts to push this weird fucking agenda he had. Despicable human being, anyway. So naturally, I don't know anything about Alan Watts. I don't know anything about his videos. I don't know anything about what he believed, and I can't sit through or watch a single one of them because of this. Now, I know some people could say, that that's being kind of narrow-minded for not wanting to listen to his message because of that one individual, but that one individual is someone I was actually stuck with at that time, living with at that time, and I was having to endure that garbage that he didn't even preach. He didn't practice what he preached anyway. He would actually tell me that he believed in karma. I used to marvel at that. I was like, how can you possibly believe in karma and doing the kinds of vile shit you do to people? But the topic is not about Alan Watts tonight, and it's not about quantum physics. It's about something else I stumbled across, and it's called epigenetics. Don't ask me to say that word too fast because I'll probably stumble all over it. Epigenetics is actually over 100 years old, or at least the origin of the term and the idea of it. To put it in the simplest terms possible, and I'm kind of a simpleton when it comes to science myself. I'm not I'm not a science geek. I'm not even a science fiction fan or anything like that. So, but in layman's terms, epigenetics deals with the study of changes that occur in your DNA that you weren't born with or inherited. And unfortunately, even though you have to really dig deep to find out any kind of valid information about this, a lot of people have gone hog wild with this idea. There were a few creationists that were saying, that proves Darwin was full of shit and he didn't know what he was talking about. Darwin's out, creationism is now proven and all this other. Well, Darwin didn't know what DNA was. That was after Darwin's time. It sometimes seems like a little information is a bad thing for some people, but to keep it on topic, there was all these people in one subsection, and they were talking about, well, this 100% conclusively proves that alcoholism is inherited. This proves that if your parents are drunks, you're going to be a drunk. You have no control over it. You're an alcoholic before you take the first drink. AA is now backed by science, checkmate anyone who who criticizes it. No. I can't put it any more bluntly or any more simple than that, but no, that is not what epigenetics is all about. Unfortunately, because a little information sometimes can be bad, if you go to YouTube or you go to the web right now and you type in the word epigenetics, you will be bombarded with everything from people telling you that you can think your genes into curing your cancer, to saying that if you exercise and work out while you're pregnant, your kid will naturally just come out of the womb exercising and working out and eating right. Your scientific articles about this, your scholarly works about this will tell you that right now it's not as extensively researched as genetics. But there's more questions than answers at this early stage of it, even though it's just now getting some serious attention. But it really has nothing to do with anything like being born a drinker or having a so-called alcoholic gene. There has never been any scientific evidence whatsoever that you have an alcoholic gene or an addictive personality even. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate since the topic is brought up. I'm gonna 100% go with them on this. I'm going to say that, yeah, it's true. Somewhere in my DNA and in my blood, I have an alcoholic gene floating around, or several 100 million of them throughout my cellular structure. And if I drink, it's off to the races for me and I'm fucked. And it's because of this cellular structure. Let's just say that I'm going to claim that that's 100% true, even though there's no proof of this whatsoever. Still doesn't mean the answer to my problem is going to a meeting and saying I'm powerless, and saying that a group of drunks has to do my thinking for me, and saying that I need to do 4-step inventories for the rest of my life and wallow in guilt and shame and stuff my feelings and look at my part in every bad thing that happens to me. It doesn't prove that at all. It doesn't prove that your higher power is keeping you from drinking. As a matter of fact, if it was scientifically proven that it is something in your cellular structure, sinus has been bothering me, like cancer, let's just say that was one of the topics brought up on the subject of epigenetics, then it would be a biological problem, and therefore it would become a scientific problem. And a scientific problem is not solved by higher powers and 4-step moral inventories. Okay, it's not solved by some immaterial force that you can't even properly define in your literature that's supposed to run my life and my thinking for me. It's not solved by humbly asking him, as they put in big block letters, to remove shortcomings. So even if what you're saying is true and you can inherit an alcohol cell or an alcohol gene, it still doesn't make your program 100% right. It doesn't prove anything good. In fact, it would be evidence contrary to your program. So you're checkmating the critics a little bit too soon, but I did see those comments. I did see a few of those, and I couldn't help but find it painful how much misinformation these days just gets twisted around and gets used for any number of things. I remember this sponsor of mine that loved all this quantum physics. Well, he didn't understand quantum physics any more than I do, any more than anybody else that's not an actual physicist does. You know, he would sit around and say, well, I truly believe that God is working in my life, and I truly believe we're all connected. And then he would say, energy can't be destroyed, so I'm going to live forever. You know, energy can't be destroyed, so you're going to live. I mean, you know, there's nothing in quantum physics that backs up this bullshit you're talking about. Any more than there's nothing in epigenetics that backs this up. This is not solid scientific proof of anything. But, you know, inevitably, invariably, somewhere out there, if you become open about your anti-AA thing, or if you even dare to make a statement online or in public that there is no proof whatsoever that alcoholism is a disease, that the word alcoholism exists, that there is no proof whatsoever that you inherit your addictions, inevitably, if you do that right now with what I was reading over on my day off, somebody's going to come out of the woodwork. and they're going to come at you with this phony science, and they're going to come at you with a link to some phony articles, and they're going to tell you, oh, you've been proven wrong now. It's totally proven wrong now. Just like they always say, AA is proven to work. And by the way, scientists, I'm going to say something really, really, really evil here, something that cannot be said in today's world aloud. Scientists can be wrong, Yeah, that is true. Scientists can be wrong. It reminds me of something I saw the other day, and it was on a social media. Somebody was posting a video where they were promoting AA, and they were saying, first of all, I'm a scientist, and I am a psychiatrist, and I'm this, and I'm that, and, if AA doesn't work for you, it's all your fault, or something like that. Look, just because you have an education and a degree, it doesn't prove anything, okay? That would be like me saying, that would be like somebody saying, I'm a nuclear physicist, therefore I know who should be elected president of the United States. It has as much correlation as that. Just because you're a nuclear physicist doesn't mean you understand how economics work. You don't understand the politics of a situation, and you don't understand who is best for the country. I saw a guy one time that said, if it were up to him, the only people who could vote would have to be people who had served in the military. Well, there again, there's no evidence anywhere that suggests because you've served in the military that you have a better understanding of how the government works than anybody else. These are arguments from authority. And, in the case of someone using some half-assed, it's not even a scientific theory. It's something that you have taken with a scientific word like quantum physics or epigenetics, and you're just using it to push what you like. Okay. Will they one day conclusively prove that you inherit your addictions? Well, they might. Okay. We don't know in science what the future may hold. We don't know what they'll one day come across. They could very well prove that. It still doesn't prove that a religious cult is the answer to everything. And it doesn't certainly prove that just because there are activities within our DNA that we fully don't understand yet, that somehow Darwin just goes right out the window. Believe it or not, some of Darwin's theories over the years have been challenged and overturned. What this makes me think of is something I was reading about not too long ago, and there's a comparison between what happened here and AA, and I'll get to it when I tie this in together. But there was a guy, I hope I'm saying the name right. It's either Lysenko or Lysenko. He was a Soviet agricultural worker, and he threw away the concept that we use our most common idea of genetics comes from a guy named Mendel. Mendelian genetics is what it's called. He was a dude that crossbred flowers. He was either Austrian or Czech. It was the Silesian Republic, so it was before there were clearly defined boundaries like they are today. But anyway, I won't go into a lot of detail about it. It's unnecessary, and I don't quite get all of it myself. I'd have to pull up a lot of articles to demonstrate this. But Lysenko came along, and in a nutshell, I won't try to go into all of it. He had this idea that simple plants like weeds or like regular grass, under the right conditions, which we could even do today with the advancements we have in science, but they could be crossbred to produce wheat or barley or corn. After World War II, there was a big famine going on in the Soviet Union. I mean, after all the wreckage of everything. And this guy said that what we know about genetics was more or less a capitalist invention and that he could prove otherwise. Well, of course, he couldn't do that. You can't take regular plants or whatever it was he was exactly trying to crossbreed together, and you can't produce massive amounts of corn and massive amounts of wheat based on that alone. However, his idea got popular with Stalin. Stalin kind of liked it. And, another thing the Soviet Union kind of liked to do, they liked to take working class peasants, or at least people that were relatively unknown, and make them heroes, because it was always an uplifting thing for the people to hear, here this guy is, he's a peasant, he's a nobody, and now he's at the top of he's at the very top. And you can be like that too if you want to. All you got to do is work hard, right? And anyway, he became, what he was promoting, what he was teaching was actually all of a sudden signed into law. Lysenko is right. Everything we knew about science prior to this is wrong. Throw it all out. Now, if you were a scientist at the time in the Soviet Union, and you said what this guy's saying is bullshit, you either got shot or you got sent to a gulag, or you were just discredited to the point that you were literally, you left your scientific position under a cloud. You were ridiculed. This guy doesn't believe in Lysenko. He's a goddamn moron if he doesn't do that. Those were the lucky ones. This went on for a very long time until Khrushchev was able to take the reins after Stalin's death. And I don't understand how Lysenko was allowed to go on for as long as he did without producing any tangible results. I don't see how they could have adopted this phony science and kept it going without him producing any real results as a result, of his work. But it took Khrushchev coming along, and he didn't really have the same fond feelings for Lysenko that Stalin did. And when scientists began to question him openly again, Khrushchev did nothing to stifle them. And of course, like a big wave, kind of like a leaky wall that suddenly busts open, the dam burst open, and all the scientists throughout the Soviet Union just came forward and said, this guy's a crock. What he's preaching is just simply not true. And he died in the obscurity somewhere, pretty much exiled, and the Soviet Union didn't even publish his obituary as a result of it. And the tantalizing question for me was, how does something phony get pushed on the public for that long, if it doesn't produce results? And then it kind of, it's really bizarre what it translated back to me. Since the early 70s, when we had certain Congress people, and there's one in particular, can't think of his name right now, I'd have to look him up, who more or less pushed this treatment center agenda onto the country, even though Bill and Bob made a lot of money off AA prior to this idea that these were just two humble old guys that just helped millions of people, well, it's bullshit. But when the treatments, I don't call them the treatment center monopoly these days, I call them the treatment center cartel is what I call them. Or I call them the treatment center conglomerate. But when they really came to prominence, almost, it's been over 4 decades ago, really, before they took control of everything. They've been pushing the same phone. They've been pushing a bad science on the public all these decades. And the government has yet to lift a finger to try to look into the efficiency of it or do anything about it, really. They just keep sending people into this broken system. And you got all these people walking around drunk, and you got these people that commit suicide. You got these people that are drinking themselves to death or sharing needles with each other out there on the streets simply because the government refuses or has refused, not the present government, but we got a decades-long scam going on here. Has refused to do anything about it whatsoever except keep pushing this phony science on people. And I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy. Okay, I'm not saying that there's a shadowy organization full of AA people somewhere meeting in a government lab, in Area 51, saying, we got to get some more AA stuff out there. We got to get more people court-ordered, as part of the conspiracy for world domination. No. Okay, of course not. I'm not saying that. I think that what has happened is a lot of people along the way have realized that they can make a shit ton of money off this disease, and boom, it's gave birth to a wide industry. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I knew that were complete, utter scumbags that had no training whatsoever in anything even remotely close to counseling or anything in terms of understanding the human condition, that were halfway house owners, that were treatment center counselors and all this other shit. People with no background in any kind of medicine or any kind of training whatsoever that took like a year-long course and become some kind of counselor or something. That's, they're profiting pretty well off of this. I'm not saying that, that low-level counselors themselves are making a killing off of it, that they're not all rich, but I guarantee you there's a lot more money being made off of this than people at first glance realize. Not to mention the fact that you've got so many people who are 12-step members that are a part of the ruling hierarchy or the elites or the entertainment industry. The entertainment industry is really in love with the 12-step bullshit. You see, one of the major differences, I think, between, say, what the Soviets did with Lysenko is we don't have to shoot people or put them in gulags or really make them non-persons or whatsoever. They use here in this country, the best thing that people use on both sides of the aisle, on all sides of the aisle, is ridicule. All you have to do is ridicule everybody into silence that doesn't agree with whatever it is you're promoting. Everybody knows that the 12 steps work. Everybody knows that AA saves millions of lives. Everybody knows that you can't do it alone without a higher power. Everybody knows, it's kind of a thing that they made as a go-to here. It's not really, like I said, some organized government conspiracy. It's just a simple matter of probably follow the fucking money. I'm not big on TV series and stuff, but a couple of months ago, I was bored to death. I couldn't find anything to watch in my spare time, and I stumbled across this TV series, and I happen to like the actress that was in it. I can't say her name right now off the top of my head, but every other fucking line, she was like a psychic detective or something like that. I can't quite pinpoint what it was she did, but because I didn't watch more than a couple of episodes, but every other line was AA related. I swear to God it was. And the writers of that were obvious 12-step cult members, and it was done in such a loving kind of way where anybody who's not aware of the poison of AA preaching would fall for it. Like there was one that I was watching where the serial killer is mentally disturbed or some shit like that, and she says to the main cop or whatever in the case, maybe he's constitutionally incapable of being honest even with himself. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my fucking God. It totally ruined it for me. Couldn't watch it at all. I've been hearing about a couple of other shows out there that I was almost interested in picking up out of boredom just to see what they were about. And I heard that it's inundated with AA bullshit, and I'm like, well, I don't guess I can go there with that. One of my favorite series I watched, and I'm wrapping up. I know I'm going overboard here. It was the Americans, about KGB agents operating here in the United States. And I remember one episode there was this fucking AA meeting, and I was like, oh my God, I hope they're not going to. But it turned out it was okay. They were there to spy on an AA member who happened to work for a government facility. I can tolerate that. I could tolerate that. Anyway, there was one other point that I thought I was going to make on this, but I think I've conveniently forgotten it at the last minute. Anyway, I've talked too long anyway. See you guys hopefully next week, probably be in 2 weeks.